Okay, so this next part, we're going to start creating controls for the fingers. As we go through this, what we're going to do is we're going to do this finger by finger by finger. So I'm not going to do like, I will do all the fingers, but I'm not going to, I'm going to fast forward some of them. So after we do like 2 or 3 sets of fingers, you should have kind of the process for how to do all of them. So I'll probably fast forward through a bit of the left hand and then also the same for the right hand. Okay, at this point we want to import some curves to use. And so let's import, if I can find it, the control curves file that I gave you. Okay, and I don't want anything but the cube curve, so I'm going to delete those. And actually, I know I'm going to rename this one to index LT underscore index 1 underscore capital CTL. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and turn the girl's visibility off. With this selected, I'm going to go to my move tool. I'm going to hold V as in Victor. I'm going to snap that right to that joint. And if you notice, it was kind of hard to see, so you could zoom in and it could be like that. Just make sure that it's snapped to that joint system right there. And at this point, that looks pretty good. Now, as I go through this, it may seem a little confusing at first. Just follow through very carefully in the order that I go through, and it all should work out just fine for you. And as we go through multiple fingers, it should start to make more and more sense. The main thing is, as we create a section of controls, we're going to want to make sure that things are very clean before we go like to the next, knuckle or to the next joint and so forth. Okay, at this point, we're going to want to create a group for this. So I'm going to do Control G. Actually, that didn't give me the right name there. Copy that, paste that, do CTL underscore capital GRP. Okay, my pivot point is down there, and I do want it there. So one easy way to do that, just go to Modify and Center Pivot, and we'll see that our pivot is centered, our group is really clean, and our index finger is not. So we want to make sure that that's clean. So we're going to go to Modify and Freeze Transformations. Okay. So the way this works, we want to orient our group to have a little bit of junk in our rotation, and we want to use our group to orient our controllers to our finger bones. And very similar to the way that we had our joint system working. So these groups will live in the background and hold the junk, and then we'll have these very clean zeroed out rotations for our actual curve. And so the way we do this is if we click on this joint, and then we come over here and we control click on the group. So during this process, you want to be very careful, right? You want to click the joint and make sure when you control click, you're clicking on the group and not the actual curve. So make sure that you control click on the group. And then if we go to constraint and orient, we want to make sure that maintain offset is not checked for this. And so when we click add, we'll see that that oriented that group to face along with our joint. And now we can see that there's some junk in our rotation. But if we click on our actual curve, or come out here and click on our actual curve, we can see that this is very clean. Okay, so we can see that our curve is oriented, but not here. The group is holding that junk. Now, the other thing is we don't want this constraint to stay in there. We just wanted to use that to help orient the group. So now, the other thing I tend to do is I'll turn on the girl just so that I can help resize these boxes. And so as I resize these, I'm going to use the curve or the control box. So not the group. I'm going to actually use the actual curve. But I want to be very careful not to affect the translate or the rotate, because if I affect those and then I do like a modify freeze transformation, things could break. So you want to be very careful during this part to only make sure that you're just changing the scale. And so I'm going to go to my scale tool. I'm going to scale this down a little bit. And the reason why I'm doing this is because I know there's going to be another box right here. There's going to be another box here. So there's going to be a ton of boxes. And I don't want them overlapping. I just want a nice, easy box of curves to be able to select. But I don't want them all overlapping, and then it's hard to select, you know, that specific box for that specific joint. And so I do that on the curve and only affect the scales. Again, don't affect the translate or rotates. Okay. Once we've done that, though, we can do a modify and freeze transformation. And you can see that curve is now very clean, and so is the group. And I consider the group clean because it's just holding the junk to keep things oriented correctly. Okay. So the process to make the next joint control curve is this. I want to go to my index group, and I want to duplicate it, and I want to change the name. I'm going to change that to index 2 and index 2. Okay. And so before I do anything, I want to always double check this so my curve looks clean. My group, before I move this down to this next chunk, next joint, I want to make sure that this is clean, right? So it may look weird out here, but it's clean here, and that is what I want. Okay, once this group is clean, I'm not going to move the curve. I'm going to control this by the group. So I'm going to hold V as in Victor. I'm going to snap that to the next joint. So I zeroed out the rotation. Now the translates, I want to do a modify and a freeze transformation for that to get that back to being clean. Okay. So at this point, that looks pretty good. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to click on the joint. Again, being very careful not to click on the curve, but control click just the group. Then we want to do that same process. Constrain, orient, maintain offset is not checked. We'll orient that, and then we'll delete the orientation. So if I click on the group, you can see some junk, but my curve is very, very clean. And so I'm going to duplicate that process again and change this name to index 3. Index 3. Again, I need to move this down to this joint, but before I do that, I need to make sure that this is zeroed out, right? Again, it looks weird in here, but this is very clean, and this is going to work out really well for us. So I'm going to use my move tool, V as in Victor, snap it to that next joint, and then we wanted freeze transformation. And the reason why we want to do freeze transformation and not just zero this out like the rotation is, well, because it just moves it back. So we actually want to freeze that to be the new 0. Okay. All right, cool. So same process. Click this joint. Shift. Oh, nope, we don't want to do that. Click the joint. Again, be very careful. We want to do the group. So come over here and control click on the group. Do constrain, orient, maintain offset. Okay, and then go ahead and delete that. So if we click on each one of these index groups, right, we should see some junk, but then the curves are very clean. So group, junk, curve, clean. Group, some junk, curve, clean. Okay, let's turn our girl on real quick. And let's size this. So I'm going to come to this box. I'm going to size it down a little bit. So again, it's okay as long as it's just on the scale. And modify freeze transformation. And then this box, scale that. And then modify and freeze transformation. Cool. So now I have some nice clean boxes, but if I click over all this, I can see that this is very clean over here. Okay, let's turn the girl off. I only wanted to use her as just kind of a reference for the size of the boxes. So I'm going to turn that off for a second. Now we want to hook these up, so if I rotate this, the rest of these boxes will rotate with that. And so the way that we do that is we'll need to come to index 2 and then control click, so our group, index 2 group, control index 1, the control curve. So group to curve, P to parent. And now you'll notice when I click on this group, like a bunch of stuff in here changed. Don't worry about that because we worked in a very clean fashion, but we want to work in the order that we did because these kind of numbers would be impossible to manage. But as I click on index 3, it's very clean, things are set up. When I parent it up, yes, some extra junk will be added on there, but because we've worked in this order, it'll just work out for us really well. Okay, so I'm going to open up the index 2, so I want to take index 3 group, control click index 2, the control curve, and then P to parent. So we want to parent it in that order. So you should have this little daisy chain of index 1 group, a little minus, and then the curve, and then the group for index 2, and then the curve, right? These little daisy stair step chains. Okay, at this point, we now have these controllers working with each other, right? But they're not controlling the joints just quite yet. So the way we do that is, and my recommendation would be to not use the outliner for this particular part, but to use this out here to connect the joints. And the reason why is we want to make sure that we're getting the box and not the group. So if we click out here, we know that we're getting the actual control box or the curve. Okay, so I'm going to get the box. I'm going to shift click the joint. I'm going to come to constraint. Now this is going to be very careful for this, for the joints. We need to come in here and actually turn maintain offset on. Okay, so we're going to click add. We'll click the box, shift click the joint, constraint, orient, maintain offset is on. Box, shift click the joint, constrain, and then orient, maintain offset is on. Okay, so if we turn our girl back on and turn our joints off, because eventually we're not going to want to use the joints, right? We're just going to want to use the controllers to drive everything. Okay, so if I just select those boxes, you can see now that we have a control system that is now driving the animation or the deformations for the hand, and so that's cool. So let's go ahead and turn that off. Okay, so we need to make another set of boxes for the middle finger. Now you'll notice that I have 1, 2, 3, 4 joints for each one of these fingers, and then 3 for the thumb. We're not actually going to create a control box for the tips, right? We don't need to rotate those. Those are just there for deformations. So each finger is going to get 3 controllers. So this finger will get 3, this finger will get 3, and the pinky will get 3. And then the thumb bone will only get 2, right? Because we don't need 1 for that tip. Okay, so the way we're going to start out by creating our middle finger is we want to just come to this index 1 group, and I'm actually going to shrink it. I'm going to duplicate that. I'm going to open it up once and then open it up twice. And I actually just want to delete everything but this top group for this duplication. So let's go ahead and rename this to LT middle 1, LT middle 1. Okay, cool. And so again, it's the same process, right? Before we move a group, because the groups are what we move, right? Before we move it, we want to just kind of come through here and just click on this and look and make sure that everything is zeroed out. And this group is not, so we want to zero that out. Okay. Again, it looks funky, but that's okay. That is what we want. Hold V as in Victor. I'm going to snap that to the next joint. Cool. Again, the way we zero that out is through modify and freeze transformation. And then we're going to come to the joint, and then be very careful. Again, we don't want to click the curve, we want to get the group. So joint, control click the group, and then we're going to go to constraint. Now that we're switching fingers, this is going to be something you're really going to need to pay attention to, is to come to the orient. And because we turned this on to help control the joints, it's on, but we don't want that on for this part of things. So let's uncheck that, and let's add, and boom, it's oriented to that knuckle bone. So let's delete the constraint. Okay, that's good. That has some junk. Very clean. All right, so let's duplicate this process. So let's duplicate middle 1. We'll rename that to middle 2. Middle 2, and then again, before I move it, let's zero the rotation out. Okay, go to my move tool. It's clean, so I know I can move it. I can double check the curve. That's clean. Go back to the group, because again, it's the group we want to move. So V as in Victor. Snap that to the next joint. Cool. Modify, freeze transformation. Click on the joint. Again, group, so control click that, constrain, orient, no maintain offset, add. Delete the constraint. Now we have group with junk and very clean middle. Cool. So let's duplicate this process again. So middle 2, let's duplicate that group. So again, we want to make sure that we're duplicating groups and not curves. So middle 3. Middle 3, I need to move this, but before I do, oops, the rotations need to be zeroed out, and then V as in Victor. Modify, freeze transformation. Joint, control click the group, constrain, no maintain, and add. Delete the constraint. Okay. So I'm going to turn the girl on. So I think these boxes in the middle here are a little bit big, so I'm just going to scale some of this down. Okay, and I'm doing the curve, right? And so if I click it out here, I know that I'm getting the curve, so that's okay. Because you can't click the group out here, right? You're just getting the curve. Okay, so again, not affecting any of this. Scale's good. I'll do modify and a freeze transformation after I get a size that I like. Okay. Cool. Again, only scale, modify, freeze transformation. And again, I'm only using the girl as a visual guide just so I can help size the boxes, okay? And I'm going to turn her back off. And then again, we just want to get all this connected up, right? So boxes, controlling boxes, and then have the boxes control the joints. So the way we do this, right? Middle group 2, control click middle 1 curve, the control curve. P to parent. Again, it'll throw junk on there, but that's okay because we've worked very clean up to this point, and so that's just fine. Then middle 3 control group, and I can also middle mouse to parent. You could do that as well. I'll just go ahead and continue to do the P for parent, but you could middle mouse drag that right onto that too. So middle 3 group, control click middle 2 control curve, okay, and then P to parent. So now if I come out here and I click rotate that, I'm moving all the boxes, and then only the second 2, and so forth. Okay, so again, I would advise you come out here to do this next part. Click the box, shift click the joint, constrain, orient, and now we have to flip this, right? So click the box and make sure that maintain offset is checked, and add. Box, shift click the joint, constrain, orient, maintain offset is checked. Box, joint, constrain, orient, maintain offset is checked. Okay, so now turn the grill back on. Try out these boxes. We can see that that's working too, right? I don't know that we'd want to ever bend her finger backwards, but I guess you could if you really wanted to. Try again. Let's turn off joints and geo. That way it'll just be a little easier to select the curves. There we go. Yeah. So now we're getting that deformation a little bit better because I wasn't getting all the curves selected. So at this point, I think that's pretty good. Cool. And now we can, I'll do one more joint in slow motion, and then I'm going to fast forward the rest of it. So I'm going to come to middle one, the group, collapse that, and duplicate that. I'm going to open that up, delete everything else. Okay. I'm going to rename this ring 1, ring 1. Okay. Again, before I move this group, make sure that everything's clean. Always think it's a good idea also just double check the curve. So things are clean. Okay. With the group selected. So again, making sure group and not the curve. V as in Victor, move that over. Modify, freeze transformation. Joint. Oh, turn all that back on. Joint. Control click the group. So remember, not the curve. So joint. Control click the group. Constrain, orient, and then because we're switching fingers, this got flipped on last time for the joint. So now we need to flip it off. So add. Delete. Okay. That has some junk for the rotation. That is extremely clean. Okay, so let's just keep duplicating this process. Duplicate that group. Ring 2. Ring 2. Before I move it, that group needs to be zeroed out, right? V as in Victor. Move that right there. Okay. Modify, freeze transformation. Okay. Joint, control click group, constrain, orient, add, delete the constraint. Okay. Duplicate the group, rename, okay. Double check everything before we move it. Group needs to be zeroed out. Again, looks funky, but that's okay. V as in Victor. Snap that there. Cool. And so, freeze transformation. So at this point, we should have some pretty clean stuff. Okay. We do need to come here. Orient this last one. So joint, control click the group, constrain, orient. Delete the orient, constraint. And now if we look at the groups, they just have some junk, rotation, but the curves are clean. Junk, rotation, clean curves, junk, rotation, clean curves. That looks great. So let's turn the girl on. We'll come out to this view and we'll just size down some of these boxes a little bit. So I'm just going to scale some of that down a little bit. So that looks okay. freeze that transformation. Scale down that box a little bit. Yep. And freeze that transformation. Cool. Let's turn the girl back off. Let's get this stuff connected up. Okay. So again, we'll get extra stuff added, but at this point we can tell that it's pretty clean. So we're going to click this, control click that, P to parent. Open all that back up. Ring 3 to ring 2 curve, P to parent. Cool. So again, as we click on all these boxes, we can see that it's oriented because we use that group, but things are very, very, very clean for the actual controller, right? So when we get in there, we can see that that curve is oriented to work with that particular joint. Okay, cool. So now we need to connect joints up, right? So when we rotate this, we want the joints to move too. So again, my advice is to do it through here. So click the box, shift click the joint, constrain, and then maintain offset, and add. Click the box, shift click the joint, constrain, orient, and add. Click the box, shift click the joint, constrain, orient, and add. Alright, so at this point, turn everything off but the curves, just so I can test some of this out. So now I should have 3 fingers with controls on them. Cool. I'm just going to need to do that for the pinky, the thumb, and then do that for the right side. We worked on the hands. So one thing you'll notice is that as I rotate this, these are not rotating or staying with the hand. So what we'll want to do, let me collapse all this. When we're done with all of our fingers, we're going to want to take all these groups, right? So collapse it all down and get all the finger groups, okay? And then you want to shift click this control curve, okay? And then do a P to parent. So now if we rotate that, we'll see those little boxes now follow the hands, and we could then rotate those fingers accordingly. Okay. I'm going to undo some of that for now, just so, because I'm going to do all the fingers at once. So I would wait until you get like all the rest of the fingers. But you'll see me in the video. I'm going to just fast forward, and then at the very end you'll see me select all the fingers that I have, right, for both the left, for the left side, and then I'll shift click this and then parent those, and then I'll want to do the same thing over here. So once I have all these fingers selected, then I want to get each one of the groups for this and then parent it to that. So right hand fingers, the groups get parented to that. I might slow that down at the very end. Most of this will be fast forwarded, but I might slow that down at the very end just and talk that through one last quick time. Okay, but at this point I'm going to fast forward. Okay, at this point, we just want, again, I just want to parent these groups into our wrist controller. So I'm going to specifically look over here for all the LT wrist, or not the wrist, the LT here. Starting with LT index 1, LT middle 1, ring 1, pinky 1, and LT thumb 1. So just go through and just get the very first initial group selected, and then just shift click the curve in your viewer, and then click P to parent. And then we'll come over here and do the same thing. So we'll do RT index 1 through RT thumb 1, shift click, and parent, P to parent. So now if I rotate this wrist, I'll see that the finger controls go with things, and I can see that I can rotate my fingers. I'll just do a quick test on this side. Yep, it looks like that's all working. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful.